Dear students, welcome to my classroom of research methodology in history. Today I am trying to give you some ideas about certain concepts in research methodology. They are hypothesis, argumentation, and problematic. What is hypothesis? Hypothesis means how we are looking at a particular topic and what we are designing with regard to our research on that particular topic. That is called hypothesis. That means we are guessing something. We are assuming something. So why hypothesis is important in history or in any research related to social science or anything else? Without having a prior idea, it's not possible for us to proceed to a particular direction. Suppose if anybody wants to do a research on the education system which we have and how our education system worked during the COVID-19 period, then he or she needs to have some kind of an idea that why and how she or he will be pursuing this research. Why means what is your objective behind a particular research, and how means the ways or the methods which you are adapting for a particular investigation. In research methodology, hypothesis plays a very important role. Sometimes what you are guessing or what you are assuming, your prior ideas must not be the same after completing your research and when you are having your conclusion. That is known as null hypothesis. That means you have thought something else in the beginning of your research, but the end product of your research is something different of your hypothesis or of your prior idea. So, hypothesis is a very much significant component of both social science and scientific researches. Without hypothesis, it's not possible for us to plan our research design, because you have to have a clear idea which is definitely not static, that what you want to do. Hypothesis is something which is also a reflection of your critical thinking. That the hypothesis is helping you to understand the scenario where you are trying to experiment or where you are trying to analyze the situation to get the conclusion. If I give you one example of hypothesis, especially of null hypothesis, then it would be, if we have a research on the literacy rate in India, then we have to give emphasis on the data which we will be collecting from NFHS, National Family Health Survey. If we have a prior thought that in all the states of India we are having satisfactory level of literacy, then this hypothesis has to be a null hypothesis, because if we scrutinize the data state-wise, then it is evident, or it would be what I can say provable, that all the states are not having same literacy rate. But as you have thought something which also motivated you to do research in that particular direction, that is hypothesis. Now I would like to say something about the position of arguments or argumentation in scientific or in researches in social sciences and humanities. Hypothesis and argumentation, both these concepts are interrelated. You are thinking something, you have an idea, and now the time is to prove your idea. When you are trying to establish your view, that is called argument, and a series of arguments where we are having like counter arguments as well, known as argumentation. So here we are working on premises. That means the facts or the parameters which are helping us to frame our arguments. Argument is a philosophical term. Since the inception of philosophy, if we would like to engulf in the ocean of knowledge which started to have a definite shape in times of Plato, Socrates, Aristotle and all, from that time onwards, people started arguing with each other. There is no harm of arguing or conflicting or contradicting or opposing the views of others in a constructive manner. That is also a reflection of your individual identity, your self-image, or what you think, what you thought, and how you are trying to respond to the cross currents related to your own perception about a particular object or matter or a concept. It also creates discourses, that means academic dialogue. When we talk about argument or argumentation, that is also related with the continuity in the discussions, which is discourse, as I have already mentioned. And here also we find subjectivity. That means when we are arguing about a particular fact, the way how we are projecting or expressing ourselves, that is subjective. So here we find both subjectivity and objectivity. I can give you one example of argumentation. According to some scholars, the Great Mutiny of 1857 was the first war of independence in India. But some scholars also have opined that it was just a revolt by the sepoys, or a mere sepoy mutiny, or the revolt by the soldiers, the Indian soldiers, the native soldiers. So here we find two streams of argument, which can be also considered as argumentation. The facts are same, but the way to look at the facts is different. That is also a reflection of our individualism, that we are individuals, we have our own ideas, concepts, perceptions, views, reservations, intuitions, etc. So, what you are thinking, that is your hypothesis, which is helping you to plan your research design, though this concept of hypothesis is not static. It might change when you are coming up with your end results of a particular research project. But when you are trying to formulate your research in a constructive manner, when you are working on your chapters, you are trying to write your dissertation, that time you need to be logical. This logical presentation of yourself or how much you are rational or logical with regard to your judgment about a particular theme is argument or argumentation. As we talked about the premises with this regard, then we have various types of argumentations or arguments. Suppose if we talk about the deductive argument, what's that? When we are very much sure about the certainty of the fact. That means deductive arguments are always truth. But there are more types of arguments which we have, which are also following the notion of postmodernist idealism. If I talk about inductive or abductive kind of argument, then the truth is not static or not permanent, where the truth can be changed. So here we have a kind of superlative stance of truth which is hanging between the truth and the apparent. It might be a result of hyper-reality as well, where we don't know that what we are experiencing perhaps is not the truth, or something else is definitely behind that. If I give you the example of the creation theory, that what Stephen Hawking wanted to say, or what Albert Einstein wanted to portray with regard to time and space, and the foundation of the entire universe, or the various theories related to the cosmic world. There we find various arguments which are, in my opinion, inductive and abductive, because still people are researching and we are not sure that whether we can unanimously accept those arguments. This is also very much true in case of science and religion. Science is objective, and also for religion, the presence of the Supreme Soul is a truth which is objective. The presence of the Supreme Soul is a truth which is also objective. But here we find that it becomes very much difficult from the perspective of theology or religious study to prove the hypothesis which they have, that is, the presence of the Supreme Soul. There, whatever the arguments we find are all between truth and the apparent status. That means for the people who believe in God, for them it's a truth, but the people who are very much involved in scientific researches with regard to physics and what I can say, the other hardcore branches of science, perhaps for them it needs further clarifications. So there is a term which we can use here to understand the relationship between science and religion, and that term is known as metaphysical, or what I can say, hypothetical. That means something which needs more explanations, more knowledge, more wisdom, so that even we can challenge the existing truth as well, which is an example of either inductive or abductive kind of argument. And what is the deductive kind of argument? Where we are sure about the truth or the fact, As for example, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So we need to understand the arguments are very much important so that we can make ourselves more knowledgeable and wise, so that our knowledge could be utilized for the betterment of the society. This concept of argument is somewhere related to the medieval teaching pedagogy of Europe, that where we talked about scholasticism, like how the Christian priests along with others, they talked about the various secrets of the universe along with theology and the other branches of knowledge. They used to have conversation with their students or pupils or disciples. So it was not like the teaching learning method which we used to have nowadays. There was no book, no chalk, no duster, no blackboard, or if I give you the example of the present context, there was no laptop, no smart class, no projector. The teachers, they used to communicate with the students to a great extent. Their communication was a part of their argument or a series of communications, sometimes from argumentation. Those arguments were very much valuable to form the theories by these teachers who were also known as the schoolmen. So the genesis of argument can be found in the writings of Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, but it got a definite shape when we find that how the schoolmen in the medieval Europe, through scholasticism, they preached education. As I'm talking about argumentation, like that how in medieval Europe the priests, the Christian priests along with others, like how they tried to preach argumentation or logic. And here I must say that when I'm talking about the premises, it's also important for us to know the analogy and fallacies as well. What does it mean that when we talk on analogy? That means the series of argument where we find some statements which are the deductive statements, that means they are true, or sometimes we are also getting some arguments which are false or not true. So when we are having arguments both in the forms of true and false, that is called analogy. What is fallacy? When we are trying to establish an argument which is baseless. Here I must mention about the artificial intelligence, where the concept of argumentation is taking a new shape. That we are in a digital world and mostly our arguments are objective, but here we find less subjectivity. So that is also very much controversial and crucial, because we are losing the human touch in the system of knowledge. The knowledge which we are imparting to others with the help of artificial intelligence, that needs to be more subjective and human, but unfortunately the robots, they cannot have minds or emotions like us. So here we need to deconstruct or decode the relationship between argumentation and artificial intelligence. Now the time is to say something about problematic. Problematic means when we are talking about the problems in social sciences. That means it is a philosophical as well as a spiritual concept where we are looking at the society as a problem. And the researchers are here to solve the problems or the problematic. That means a series of problems. So when we talk problematic, that also depends on time and space, because the nature of problem is changeable. And what is problem for us sometimes, or what I can say after sometimes, to be very specific, that might not be a problem anymore. So the concept of problematic is very much related with our mindset, with the psychosocial presence of the human beings. And what is problematic perhaps might not be the same after a century, even after a day, that I have already mentioned. So here also we find the existence of hypothesis and argumentation as well. These three concepts are very much important: hypothesis, argumentation, and problematic, because they are interlinked. How can I justify my argument here, which is in my opinion deductive, that means a truth? That first we need to locate the problem that is problematic when we are doing a research. Then why and how we will be conducting the research comes. That is called hypothesis. And when we are trying to do something with this regard, like the practical application of our hypothesis is known as argumentation or argument. I can give you one example which will help you to understand the presence of hypothesis, argumentation, and problematic. See, if the higher education system during the COVID-19 is a problematic for us, then our hypothesis might be that online education system, which was launched at that time, mostly afforded by all the states in India, was good. Or we may say that it was not that much good, or the results were not satisfactory. So these are the probable ways of hypothesis. And here also we find individual perception, and that is also a part of our argumentation, either deductive or inductive or abductive. But unfortunately, in social science, nothing is deductive, because the truths are very much in a rudimentary form. They are always very much volatile, or I may say in a lucid form or shape. So here we need to be more cautious with regard to the choosing of our facts, so that we could be able to form our hypothesis on the basis of a concrete problematic. And when we are talking about problematic, there also we find various ways of dealing with problematic. In my academic script and also in my PPT, you will get various interpretations of problematic, but definitely this concept is also having a kind of dialectical nature. That here also we find a kind of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Perhaps this problematic or this concept of problematic helped Hegel and later Marx when they thought about the society and they recommended changes in the society. If I take the example of Karl Marx, For Karl Marx, the entire society was a problematic or a problem, especially when he talked about the evolution of the civilizations. When he talked the evolution of the civilizations, that time, to define his problematic, he gave emphasis on the mode of production. That means in each phase of civilization, we had different mode of production. And when his problematic was the mode of production, there his hypothesis was definitely based on the outcomes related to the mode of production. That means he gave a lot of emphasis on the transition from feudalism to capitalism, which was a part of the mode of production or the shift in the mode of production from agrarian economy to the factory-based economy, where we have machine-made goods. So, to understand this transition from feudalism to capitalism, Marx, he gave a lot of emphasis on class struggle and class exploitation. Here also we find the presence of various layers of argumentations. And finally, according to him, the deductive truth or the deductive argument is one day we will be able to achieve the classless society. But that can be a problematic for others, because it's not possible to achieve a classless society unless and until we make people aware of the same. But how can we make people aware of the same? Because the postmodernists, they have this kind of view that nothing is truth, as we can manipulate truth always with the weapon of language or knowledge. That's why Derrida, he talked about grammatology or deconstruction. We need to deframe the language or the literature of the past to understand the real psyche of the human beings. So here also, Marx's Das Kapital can be a problematic, where he talked about scientific socialism. And when he is talking about scientific socialism, that means if it's a problematic, then our hypothesis might be that whether is it possible to bring scientific socialism or not. And then if we can do our research on Das Kapital or the other ideas of Karl Marx, then we can apply the deductive and the other forms of truth or conclusion, or what I can say, the ways to looking at the matter. Perhaps all these ideals are critical, but it is also not that much difficult to absorb them and to do experiments with them. But the conclusion which we are going to achieve from all these discussions is something which can be changed later with more new insights and thoughts. That is the essence of research. In research, we cannot have any static or any permanent conclusion to the problems or the problematic of the society. Rather, it has a continuity, which is a very much part of social sciences, because in social sciences we talk objectivity as well as subjectivity. Subjectivity plays a very important role in social sciences. That's why the postmodernists, they give utmost priority to the formation of language or the construction of sentences. That's why Foucault says knowledge is power, and Gramsci give emphasis on cultural hegemony. I hope that this discussion will definitely help you to understand the relationship between hypothesis, argumentation and problematic, which are the three pillars of research, both qualitative and quantitative. And without these three pillars, it is not possible for us to achieve the truth. For science, which is a priori or an objective truth, or for arts, which is either an inductive or an abductive truth, because in social sciences we are experimenting with human minds in our laboratory. Thank you.